And welcome to this is the second in the series that Birmingham Speaks is doing, and I'm so excited about today's series. I've had the pleasure of getting to know each one of the panelists, and I know you're going to enjoy today's program. I'm just here to welcome you today. My name is Victor Brown. I'm Vice President of Business Development for the Birmingham Business Alliance, but more importantly, I'm a real supporter of Birmingham Speaks and Sarah Robinson, a phenomenal leader here in our community. Part of Birmingham Speaks' mission is to help people talk about difficult things, and certainly over the last week or two, we've had a lot of difficult topics to discuss. Whether it's having a one-on-one conversation, leading a meeting, or delivering a keynote, this Birmingham Speaks series is one of the ways that we can do that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Darlene Wilson, who actually has been the engineer of this speaker series. And once again, welcome to Birmingham Speaks Up.
Thank you for that, Victor. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, Darlene Wilson, and I'm happy to be here with you all this afternoon, but especially happy that you all have come back to join us for another very important topic this afternoon. So again, it has been my pleasure to work very closely with Sarah Robinson on really putting together our panel and really trying to better understand what conversations need to be heard during these very challenging times. And certainly all as a result and in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. And we never want to really distance our thoughts from that as much, because I think it's what will keep us conscious around these conversations as we continue to move forward and make Birmingham an even better place, and certainly an equal and a just place for all to work, live, and play. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our moderator this evening, and she is Jackie Jones. Jackie Jones is the CEO of One Degree Marketing. As many of you may know, she also does work with Create Birmingham. She does a lot of panel discussions herself, a lot of programming around small business development in the city, and we are definitely happy to have her this afternoon as our moderator. Jackie?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am super, super excited to be here. We have such an amazing group of people. I may or may not have been a little nervous when I was asked to do this, because these are such awesome people in all of their many facets. So we are going to jump right into it. I try to be very respectful of people's time. So I do want to thank Sarah and Darlene for both having me and trusting me in this space. So we're going to jump right in. I do want to just remind everyone a little bit of housekeeping. If you are joining us in the Zoom, please make sure you stay on mute. And for anyone who is not talking at the time, please just make sure that you stay on mute as not to interrupt anything. If you're joining us on Facebook, thank you so much for being here. We are so grateful for your presence as well. So we're going to jump right into it. You already know who I am. I'm Jackie. I do want to just kind of go around, in real life, it would be around the room, but I like to call it go around the Zoom, and just have everyone introduce themselves. And if you could just tell us, for our panelists, who you are, your name, what company you work with in your position or title. And I do want you to answer one starting question for me, and that is, do you have children? What are their ages or their place in education? Like, what grade are they in? And that's it. And we'll move around and move into our discussion. So if I go around the Zoom, that puts me starting with Darlene Wilson.
So again, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Darlene Wilson. I am the managing principal of Relay Accounting Management. Been in business for 15 years now, and I'm the mother of one son.
And what age is your son, Darlene?
My son is 21 years old. He's a senior in college.
Woo, all right. I pray for those days to come my way. All right, that would take me to Mr. Wayman Jackson next. Wayman, you have to unmute yourself though.
I was thinking that I had some new technology that would allow me to speak through my mute button, but obviously I don't. So that is not my superpower. Thanks for having me. Thanks for hosting this and putting this on. Wayman Jackson, I am the CEO of Education Farm, the Ed Farm. I've been in that role since April the 6th. I have a 7-year-old son named Leo. And Leo is entering the 2nd grade at Princeton Elementary, Birmingham City School.
Wow, so young. Still a place I'm waiting to get to. My son is 4. So next up, we bring us to Miss Martha Underwood.
Sure. I am Martha Underwood. I am currently head of retail software engineering at a global bank and also founder of Executive Estrogen. I have 2 wonderful boys, a 9-year-old Cole and 11-year-old Kent Jr., and they are in the 3rd and 5th grade.
2 children. I cannot say I aspire to be where you are. My one is enough. All right, that brings me to Mr. Jeremy Spratling.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeremy Spratling. I'm the founder and business manager of Corporate Facilities Management, a facility maintenance company. We're based here in Birmingham, Alabama. I have 2 kids. My daughter is going into the 11th grade, and my son is going to the 8th grade.
All right. So, and I just want to just give some context to everyone who's watching. The main reason why I asked that particular question is because we're going to get a little bit today into kind of the duality of being a Black person, a Black business owner, a Black leader, being higher in our careers, and just the dynamic that that plays against being Black parents to Black children. And that can be a little bit much. And we'll talk about that and that dynamic. But when we think about building bridges and we think about where our lives are going, how we build those things for the people who are coming after us, you know, we immediately think about the youth of our city, of our state, of our country, and of our world. And so I want to start our questions off, but I first want to read this particular piece of a recent Birmingham Business Journal article that Martha had written, and if you have the print copy, it should have been in your mailbox this week. It was in mine, but it's also online. And one portion of this kind of sets up where I want to begin. And it reads, "Through the difficulty, I explain that while I am responsible for my performance, I understand that I will be judged as a collective. For example, I'm fully aware that as a senior tech executive, I must be excellent in everything I do so that my failures don't taint or diminish those of my successor." And so I want to start with the first question, and this is going to be to Martha to begin with. And I was especially glad to see that because it really puts it in perspective how sometimes you have to play both sides here of there's me, but then there are the people who come behind me when we think about being further in our careers. And so my question to you is, at what point did you become fully aware that how you perform, who you are in your position, and what you do has not only an impact on your own individual career, but the career of those who will come behind you, who are Black executives, Black professionals? When did you realize that was the case? Were you ever taught a particular thing, or were you ever given any information or any advice from anyone in your family? How did you come about that?
Sure. So I actually learned this as a young girl. I remember I was 15 and I worked as an intern in a small law firm in Miami. And I worked with an older Black woman who would have to leave the office early to pick up her young children. And I remember on my first day, she said to me that everything that I did was going to be a reflection on her, and I needed to be impeccable with my work. And as a 15-year-old, I didn't really grasp that until I became a career woman and got into corporate America. And as I began working, what I learned is that there's an unspoken expectation for us to act a certain way, to use a certain tone, to perform without error. And as an individual contributor, if I failed, then I can jeopardize the people that come behind me. And that's because of the practice of what I think is of tokenism, of being the only, and of being comfortable with someone that looks like me in higher positions, and being comfortable and confident that they can perform at the level expected. And so because I'm that only representation of a person who looks like me, of a Black woman in those leadership positions, it's critical for me. I don't carry it lightly. It doesn't miss me that people are watching me closely, and that I need to be that example for everyone to come to the table, because there's room for more of us at the table. And that's really when I learned that. So I was taught, and I did experience it through my own career.
Do you find that you ever have found yourself having to kind of catch yourself in a moment and say, okay, this is not just about me?
Oh, absolutely. Every time, every meeting I go to, I am conscious. It is always at the forefront of my mind that my presentation, my managing the team. It's sharing that because I'm thinking of all of the young women that aspire to reach my position. And so I'm always striving for excellence so that it doesn't take any of their chances to reach the levels that I have.
You know, I think it's very interesting, and this is kind of open to anyone on our panel who wants to talk about this particular thing. I think that it's interesting, and I often joke with friends of mine about how sometimes we're carrying that weight of, you know, literally the Black culture world with us into boardrooms, into our jobs. And it's seamless. You know, no one really knows if they're not also a Black person in those spaces that we're thinking about that's to the forefront. Is there anyone else on our panel who have had experiences, you know, where you kind of had to catch yourself and say, okay, you know, this is not just about me. What I'm doing is reflected in how, like Martha was saying, how I present, you know, how much I have it together in the moment.
I can speak on that, Jackie.
Yeah.
My former profession, I come from the banking world, and there weren't many people, you know, that looked like me. Typically, in most meetings, I'm the only person of color that would be in any meeting, and I knew that, and that carries a certain amount of weight and a certain amount of pressure with it. You know, you have to perform no matter what's going on, because you can feel the eyes that are always on you. Nobody has to say it. Nobody has to tell you, hey, you're the only person of color in here. You have to perform differently. You have to perform a little bit better. We've heard that our entire lives, that hey, just being a Black person is going to be looked at differently, and your work has to be better than everyone else's. And you think it's just fodder or just things that people are saying. That's so true. You have to be better. People are looking at you. And if you have one slip up, a person in the same position can have 2 or 3 or 4 slip ups. That one slip up you may have can crush you and destroy you. The next person that comes behind you, if there is a person to come behind you, they're going to look at them that much harder. Or you may say, they may not say it, but it's in the back of their head. Hey, Jeremy messed up with X. Let's not bring this other person in because they may mess up on X, and that just may not be the case. So it's almost like you have to live in a bubble of where you have to almost be perfect.
And that's a lot of weight to carry, you know, as a person in general, but especially when you are in a position where you're trying to advance yourself, to realize it's like being a parent already. Like, even if you don't have children, it's like being a parent because you're carrying the weight of taking care of an entire race essentially with you. And Jeremy, I'm glad you bring up that you kind of hear that all your life, because I know that, you know, you spend a lot of time through organizations and with different entities doing mentorship and some community work. And so my question to you is how important do you feel like being present for youth, Black youth, and them seeing you in your position, being a business owner, how important is that? What do you think that your presence does for youth who see you in these spaces? And I would love for you to also give us kind of an idea of the organizations that you work with and what you all do.
Yeah, that's extremely important to me, and that's a mantle that I carry proudly. Me and some college friends, about 12 years ago, we started an organization, turning dreams into realities. We mentor college-age men. We help them with mentorship, scholarships, and just life guidance, so they will hopefully avoid some of the pitfalls that we had growing up. A lot of us didn't have fathers. A lot of us are first-generation college students. There's a lot of stuff we just didn't know about. So we take these young men. Typically, they go to HBCUs, but we take men of color, minorities from any organization, and try to bring them along, grab their hands and bring them along throughout life, just to keep them from bumping their head. Because one head bump set you back 6 months, 5 years. If we can avoid that, and that's incredible. Also, our fraternity, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, we have a program here in the city of Birmingham called the Black Rhinos, and we go to high schools all over Birmingham, mentoring high school men. It's so important for a person of color that doesn't have many opportunities to see somebody that's a business owner, somebody that works in corporate America, somebody that has a professional job, somebody that's working and doing things the right way, to let them know that, hey, you don't have to play basketball, you don't have to rap, you don't have to be in the streets. There's so many other things that a man can do, and we try to show them things that men do.
I think that's extremely important for people who are not people of color, who are not Black, to understand that the examples, when we think about the kind of the representation, this is why people always scream, representation matters in media and fashion and all of this stuff, because in order to truly believe you can do something, you have to be able to see yourself there. And I know that, you know, Jeremy, with you going, I see, you know, I don't stalk you on Instagram, but you put up a lot of pictures of, like, you know, cooking and stuff. And so I tend to look a lot, just because I like a good barbecue. But that's not why we're here. But I do think it's really important that, you know, people see that representation. Like you said, you may be the only Black male professional that they see. You know, that might be very possible, because you just don't turn on the TV immediately and see a person in a high position, a person of color. And so I know that, you know, aside from the fact that those organizations and those mentorships, and that's very intentional, but there are some not unintentional, but there are some ways that we also affect our younger Black youth. And I know, Darlene, that you recently, I know for sure, had an intern through UAB, I believe. What impact do you feel like having a young Black intern in your firm working, what impact that has on her trajectory in life?
So I will tell you, for me, it was certainly, I feel I learned just as much from our young adults as they learn from me. So I have had several interns in our office, all Black females in our office. And for me, it's important as an example to show them a Black female in a very male-dominated profession, but yet how we can still lead, how to still kind of claim what I consider to be my space, claim my opportunities to really navigate a professional world that respects the work that we do. And so I, as a business owner, and certainly as an accountant, try to lead my interns in a way that allows them to have an open door with me, because it's the one chance that they really get to ask a lot of questions, less judgment, and without feeling ashamed maybe of the questions that they have about what corporate America is like and what to really expect. And I don't wait for them to ask me that. I have decided that it is important for me to share that with them from the very beginning and from the start of their intern with us. What will be expected of them, how people will be looking at them. And again, I know many people don't realize this or believe this, but it is so important to continue to teach them that they're going to have to be 2 to 3 times better.
It's, you know, and I think that, you know, for anyone who's watching, I hope you're hearing a recurring theme here when it comes to being, you know, a Black person in any industry, really, because, you know, Jeremy's industry is very different from Darlene's, is very different from mine, is very different from Martha's. But when you're in a position where you feel like you only have that one shot to get it right for yourself and for other people, you do carry that weight with you. And so I'm grateful. You know, I know there are a lot of parents who are grateful for the work that I know Jeremy does and the opportunities that our young interns get to see functioning, healthy functioning, you know, adults who are doing well, who are able to balance all the things and ask those questions. And that kind of speaks to the exposure that they need to those representation. But also we have to back up too and figure out how we supplement that, right? So when we think about, and this is to Wayman, when we think about programs like Ed Farm, and I do want you to explain for a lot, I hope everybody knows what that is if you're in Birmingham, but it's very possible that you don't. But when you think about programs like Ed Farm and the idea of creating equity for Black youth, there's this big difference between us being equal and us having equity, right? When you think about those programs and the position that they play and Black youth having equity for the future, how important is something like what you're doing? How does that play into the overall piece of it? And what does that need to, how does that balance with the community work and then their exposure and experience for our youth?
Sure, thank you. So before I answer that one, I would love to just chime in a little bit on the first question that everyone, that Jerry
Absolutely.
definitely responded to well. Um, I think you were mentioning about the weight, on your shoulder. I think Martha talked about it even in her article of, feeling like you're representing, for your culture and for your community. One of the ways that, I've kind of veered and decided to look at that, you automatically know that you have a huge responsibility on yourself, and that you always feel like, someone you're representing. And if you make a mistake, then that's going to mean fewer opportunities for others. One of the ways that I've challenged myself with that is to use that opportunity to be a door opener for, others, and to not make it seem like you're the anomaly. And so I think it's very important that you have, if you're the only, I've had the fortunate opportunity to be in places where chairing boards, working at the BBA in my previous role, which was, we had a 55-member executive committee, and, it was majority white male, and oftentimes presenting to them, what you want to make sure of is that they understand when you leave there that there are more of you that are out there, that is not just, hey, here's, this one individual with this unique pathway, but it's, me getting the opportunity to tell my story as much as possible, that, yes, there's somebody else that came out of West End, that went to Ramsey, or that went to college and played sports, or that had a co-op and did A, B, and C. And just with the opportunity, they are also able, to do this. So it's really thinking about, challenging others to know that, hey, I'm not so special that, I am the only person that can do this role, but there are others who are out there like myself, but with the opportunity that they can also do this.
Absolutely. We are not the exception. We are the rule. Hello.
Yeah. Thinking about Ed Farm, I'm glad to be able to represent the organization. The work that we are beginning to do, I have the opportunity to do here in Birmingham, is tremendous. When you think about workforce development, and just what, numbers and data point to for where, the type of workforce that we have here, maybe possibly, being underskilled, and then lack of access to digital skills and digital knowledge. When you think of the new currency of, what it takes to get into the workplace now, it starts with some type of understanding of digital coding, digital training, and those things. And I think that's one of the places where equity begins to meet opportunity. And so, now that becomes the entry point for just, when you leave high school, what's that thing that's going to get me to the next place, where when you start even breaking it down from less of a, race or gender, but when you really start looking at socioeconomic status, those who are typically in a space where they don't have access to internet, access to devices, access to mentorship, and access to anything that relates around technology, you are not at an equitable playing field as it relates to, jobs that are occurring now, and then jobs of the future. So, the work that we're able to do now in partnership, with it's been talked partnership with Apple, but being able to actually offer free digital skills and digital coding and training to a community like Birmingham, I think it's a tremendous space to be in, to begin to, move the needle when you begin to talk about equity.
So can I just want to jump in right there really quick, because when we, Wayman made a really good point about, speaking to the groupings of us. So I want to stress why that is so for Black people, because we hear the conversation in our communities, in our peer groups, church life, neighborhoods, that for one stands for all with us. So one bad apple to a corporation seems to spoil the bunch for all. And I think what we would like to try to clarify as we talk about listening, as we speak to people opening up their hearts and their minds, is that you begin to see us just as that, as the individuals that we are, and not as people of a grouping, that if there's one bad one, the other one is bad, right? And so when we can get to change the hearts and minds of people and how they view the color of our skin, I think that we will see much more progression take place as it relates to opportunities for our men, opportunities for our females. There won't be that side eye, whether or not is she really able, is he really capable, because maybe the last person you employed didn't do as well in that position. Please allow us to be the individuals that we are as well.
And I mean, that's the human right? It's like, you know, when people, and I hope, like you said, people are taking some time to self-reflect and think about what their own unconscious biases are. Because, you know, no matter how great of friends you are with that one Black executive that is there, you know, in your office or in your space, you still have to pause and say, well, if that person messed something up or if they did something wrong, am I going to hold them accountable for all other people to follow them? And that is the core of, you know, why we're even having these type of conversations, because now is a pivotal moment. You know, there's the whole phrase, we are our ancestors, we are not our ancestors. Ed hit on that for a brief second as not to start a fight last week. But we are, you know, as some people like to say, our ancestors' wildest dreams, but we still have a lot of work to do in not being that one sole, you know, token person. And that's really important, which brings me to a particular question for you, Darlene. You know, we're talking about the different places where youth have to see that representation, because it's deep rooted, right? They have to see that it's possible. They have to see that it's happening. They have to see that representation and understand it for themselves so that they can move into those spaces, get those internships, get those positions so that they can turn around and do the same thing. Be good people, right? Not just be good Black people, be good people, period. And so that they can stand on their own 2 feet. But then we think about, too, our own children, right? So let's turn this around a little bit. So we think about all of this that we're doing for the children in our community, the children in our cities and our states, these different programs, things of that nature. But we have our own children to worry about as well. Like while you're taking care of the intern, you have a child in college, right? While you're bringing people into mentorship, Jeremy or Wayman, or seeing people come through Ed Farm, you have your own young children that you have to think about as well. So Darlene, I know because you have a college age son, can you talk to us a little bit about just how it is when you think about legacy business, when you think about what you're building and making sure that your children understand all that goes into what you're trying to build, what you're trying to do? How do you explain the importance of all of this dynamic, all of the work that you're doing? How do you explain that to your son so that he fully understands just how important this all weighs on everyone?
So that's a really good question, but let me say that I, first and foremost, I'm a 3rd generation entrepreneur. And so therefore I come from 2 sets of grandparents on both sides of my family and my own parents who operated their own businesses. So as a result of that, I lived a very privileged life, if you say. And I knew that the answer early on in my career was to make my own way. And so people will tell you at the start of my career who knew me at the very beginning in the early 90s that I didn't have, as much as I don't have a filter now, I really didn't have one then. And so I knew that corporate America wasn't the place for me. And, but most importantly, as I was a part of my parents' business, my son has been a part of my business. So he has been a direct part of the journey to know and understand not only what I do professionally, but the impact that this has on our family and the quality of life it has afforded for him. But I will tell you, for me, the change and idea of legacy and something to pass on to my son began to develop and evolve in me probably his early years in high school, because I realized soon, and sooner than later, that the world may not be so nice to my son because of the color of his skin. And I will tell you, just as you cannot control my destination, I would not allow anyone else to control my son's destination. And for that reason, I created a business and something that he can hold on to and call his own, and never to have to apply for a job in someone else's entity who would judge him, consider him marginalized in any way, simply because he walked in as a young Black man.
And I just, I almost have to pause right there and just let everyone who is watching, who may not be Black, let that soak in a minute, to think about deciding to build something because at your heart of hearts, that other things that were built were not built for your children. Like other entities, other opportunities, air quote, for anybody who hates air quotes, there you go. Other opportunities are not necessarily built for our children. And that's a lot to take in, and a lot to take with you, and a lot of pressure as a business owner, as you build your business, to say, hey, I can't stop working. I can't, not give it my all every single day. I can't, not put everything I have into this, because this is not for me. This is for my children and his children. And now I have a question for all of our panel. Because we are parents, because there is this duality in our lives of being able to use our positions, our success as a way for communities, cities, to see us in representation, and thinking about the responsibility we have for our own children with all that has happened, even with coronavirus, right? With all that has happened, all the pivoting, all the changing, and then the very, very needed racially charged change that we're seeing right now. How has this changed you as a professional? How has this maybe changed your vision, maybe for your own business and your own position? Has it in any way kind of affected the vision that you have? And because I know here's the thing, we expect businesses that are not Black owned to have a statement about what they're going to do, right? How are you going to be different? How are you going to do better? How are you going to make sure that Black voices are amplified, Black people get opportunities? And then we look at ourselves and we say, how has this changed how I operate? What is it that maybe I had not considered? Because though we live with it, we've gotten so used to it that even this has become a spotlight moment for us to go, whoa, okay, there's some things I could do as well. So is there anything that you all feel like has affected the way you lead, the visions that you have for yourself because of all that's happening?
So I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in here. A couple of things on what I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of what Darlene said. As a mother of young boys and having to go into an office, I come from a family of entrepreneurs as well, but I chose the corporate route because I wanted to master a system that we didn't create, right? Understand that system. So if my sons decided to go that route, then they have that opportunity, and I can teach them how to navigate that. And it's important for us to teach our young ones to be producers and not consumers, especially as a tech person, right? You're going to need to be able to read code just as you read a novel. And so it's important for us to show our sons, or for me to show my sons, how I operate in the office. I bring them in to work with me so that they can see that. But it has changed my lens a little bit, because it has made me a little bit more bold to talk about the experience in our office. I think this is a time for us all to stand up and to talk about it. And not necessarily for me to put my pain on parade, but to talk about how unconscious bias sneaks into some of our decision makings when it comes to bringing in qualified people into the office. And one of the things that I've been doing is calling some of the leaders to task, right? To say no more excuses. No more excuses that we don't have a pipeline of talented folks that look like me that can be in the C-suite, that could be into these positions, right? Attack it like you're gonna attack any initiative, critical initiative that I'm charged with leading. You fund it, you research it, you find the people, and you put them into the position so that they can lead. Because at the end of the day, it does impact your bottom line, because you need that diversity of thought at the table. If people are not comfortable with saying how, coming up with or voicing their thoughts or ideas about a new product or a new service, that impacts your business. So it impacts all of us, and we all need to get there together. And so it has been a little refreshing for me to be able to put a voice to it, because everyone is listening. It's not just in Birmingham, it's not just in the United States, it's worldwide. And I think this is now our time to really be able to come together and say, hey, this is what it is. How do we solve it?
Absolutely. Jeremy, Wayman, either of you?
Yeah,
I
go ahead, Wayman. I'll come behind you.
Okay. Yeah, I do think, from what I've seen and what we've been experiencing, since I began at Ed Farm, during the pandemic, and then now with the social unrest, I think the freedom at which people are having conversations, speaking a little bit to what Martha was saying, but the freedom to which the conversations are occurring and the conversations seem actionable. I wouldn't say as much, with the work that we're doing that that is a complete shift, because our work was set up, to go after, individuals and communities that, were underrepresented. But what I can say is these opportunities, especially when you start thinking about from the tech space and where we are with these conversations, like you're really able to take your work and spread it across everything that's occurring. So one of the things that we've been tasked with, and not just on our work, but just as an example, but we've been in this space of training teachers, with innovative skills and teaching technologies. Once everything started occurring, after George Floyd and the protests, our team, shifted to the needs of educators, because educators were saying that, hey, we're going to have these students coming back into our classroom. How do we teach them, in this new environment, not just with the pandemic, but, reconciliation and all these different things? How do we have those conversations with them? So I think that you're really starting to see, everyone being more willing to be bolder in the conversations that they want to have, and the actions and the steps that they can put towards, real solutions, and making those solutions, come across at work. And especially in the space of, I think Martha hit it on the head when you're talking about, like, finding minority talent and making a true plan around making sure that, every candidate, every minority candidate that ends up being, number 2 or number 3 at the end of the interview process, that in some type of way that, you have to figure out what's that thing that where you can take that chance, and you realize that the person, might not be exactly the boxer in the same space to what, is accustomed to being in that position. So at some point you have to throw some of those test results and some of those, metrics and different things out, and just, truly take an evaluation on what kind of unique skill set a person brings to the table. But I think we're starting to be able to have those conversations, and people like Martha and others speak up and say, hey, well, did you consider this? Or, the diversity aspect of all of this going into a decision could mean way more than, maybe going the traditional route. Or what are we doing as a company or as an entity, to truly build, a diverse pipeline? We are definitely trying to attack that from our end, on making sure that whether it's, educators, whether it's people that are taking our coding classes, that we actually are producers of people who can, one, not just be a consumer, as Martha mentioned, but who can also be able to produce and do their own thing, even if they're not working for a company and in that particular pipeline.
Absolutely. Jeremy?
Yeah, if I can revert back to the question that Darlene addressed a little earlier in regards to legacy. Have my company now, I think I'm more mindful of growing and building a legacy for my daughter and my son, like Darlene said, so they don't have to go to someone's boardroom and ask for a job or do certain things that other people don't have to do. I want to have a company that they can come work for Dad. You don't have to go anywhere else to do anything for anybody else. I'm working so hard to get my daughter, to realize that, and I hope her and my son realize that Dad's creating an easier path for you that other people have, that you can come in, and I've seen it happen over the years. We've all seen it. Someone owns a company, they bring their kids in, they take their kids to the different networking meetings, different events, let their kids meet their network and allow them to grow. I want to do that same thing, for my children. My daughter, Jasmine, I'm trying to get her, she's 16, I've been trying to get her to come to work with me for almost a year now. And it's like some taboo. I don't want to work with daddy. I don't want to work with daddy. Hopefully at some point they realize that daddy's busting his head, so you guys won't have to. Like I said, the sleepless nights that I had in corporate America, I don't want you to have those sleepless nights. Walking into a room, everybody knows who you are because you're the only one of you in that room. They already have preconceived thoughts and opinions about you. You don't have to go through that. Daddy's going through that, and dad's creating something that you don't have to. In regards to the current question that we're talking about now, as a company, we use a lot of contractors, and I caught myself living in a bubble of just finding any contractor and using them. In light of everything that's going on now, I find myself searching for and seeking out minority contractors to give them a shot, give them an opportunity. Because a lot of times, all we need is an opportunity, gain the experience, and we can go on from there. We just need the opportunity to do that. Not saying that I'm bringing a minority contractor in to do a lesser job, because that's not going to happen. Expect the same job, but we're going to give you a shot to learn something. You can take that and use that on your next job. So we try to use more minority contractors going forward now.
Yeah, I'm glad that you went back to that. Jasmine, if you're watching, your father is hiring. I need you to go ahead and get on that because he just told the world, so he put you on blast. You're welcome for that. And all of that is so important because it takes all of these pieces. It takes community. It takes access to, the equity early, the knowledge, the education, and it takes the parents making sure they understand it. And again, if you're watching this and you are not a Black person, I'm sure you may have never had to think about the big weaving of the web of making sure your children take advantage of something as simple as their first job, or making sure that they even make it there safely, or that they'll be safe when they get there. And as parents, I know a lot of us harbor that. And though I had not prepared our panelists for this particular question, and this will be my last before we close and go to questions, I have one last statement I'd like you all to make, but I do want to ask this question. I'm switching one out. Here we go. I want you all, if you have ever had a moment, and I know this may be more for our panelists who have older children, if you've ever had a moment where you were working and you had something, not a fear is a bad word for me to use, but you had your child on your mind for one reason or another. And I really want people to understand what we carry with us when we show up doing this great work and these great presentations, being on top of it, running circles around people. And it may be with your children, it may be with your spouse who has your children or something of that nature. Has there ever been a moment where you find yourself at work being that representation and having your children on your mind because
Absolutely.
of something racial?
Absolutely.
Look, the mothers are like, yes, me.
Absolutely. It limits me at times from being my complete self in some situations, because there is concern as a mother of a 21-year-old Black son. And I say that very intentionally because what I need you to know is that if my phone rang right now and it was my son, I would have some anxiety about that call. I would want to know immediately, is everything okay? And that would be the initial question that I would ask. Even at 21 years old, I would ask that question. So I don't, when he was home, before he was away in college, there are the nights where he will tell you that there were things he could not do. And he could not do them because I needed to rest. And I needed him home with me so that I could rest. So I will say to you, when you look around at your Black peers and your coworkers and those that are leading you, those that are in the boardrooms, that we have a very added level of anxiety to our day when it concerns our children, and especially as it concerns our Black males. So it goes without saying that there's not a day nor an hour that goes by that my phone is close to me, again, so that I can be connected and be accessible if something is not quite right. Is it how I want to live? Absolutely not. Was I the mother yelling when my son first started driving and telling him he cannot drive around with a hoodie on his head? He cannot, have the music playing loud once he enters the subdivision. I was that mom because all I want is for my son to come home safe and to have an opportunity to live. That's all I want.
I'm going to chime in here as well. And I'm going to tell a quick story because for everyone attending to understand how we operate in a heightened emotional state and we still operate at a high level of excellence in our positions. When I first moved into my home, I live in Helena. I was walking my son, my 9-year-old son, he was 7 at the time, to the bus stop. Someone drove up with a dog in his lap and he said, "Sick 'em." From that moment on, I walked my son every day to the bus stop. Right? I'm like, if I have an 8 o'clock meeting, I'm going to call in. And with that, those types of things happening now, you can't go into the office and not carry that with you. But we compartmentalize it and then we code switch out. And then we operate at a very high level at work, and we're still able to make that report up to our executives, lead our team, get this initiative out the door, still have the capacity to critically think with in the office, but we carrying that emotional weight about our children's safety that not everyone carries. And it is a burden that we carry. And all mothers, and I can look at Darlene and I feel that, I understand that, and I know that that is where I am headed when my sons get of age to drive, right? So that really, we carry that with us every moment of the day and every meeting, all day until we get back with them.
Jacqueline, I'll jump in here from a father perspective, and especially from a young African-American boy. So mine was completely different. And my mom had the same nervousness and anxiety that Darlene spoke to. Those are some of our most, our knockout, drag out arguments was that, you got to be in by 11 or 12 because I've got to be able to go to sleep. And so I completely understand where Darlene is coming from. But my son, in the work that I do in this education and workforce space, I knew the numbers, I knew the statistics, I knew that African-American boys are more likely at the age of 4 in preschool, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade to be singled out as problem makers, troublemakers, talkative, get sent to the principal's office than any other counterpart that they have. And me recognizing that my son is very active, energetic, very smart. So what I didn't want to do, on the work side, I didn't want to put him into a situation early on where I knew I was going to be getting calls, which I do. So I wanted to make sure that those calls were not because I felt or he felt that he was being singled out or picked on for doing things that, the same kid who might happen to be of a different color wasn't doing. And so we made an intentional decision because of, what you were kind of mentioning in your question about, do you think of, your kids, are you sitting at work and thinking about the fact that, someone might be calling you about your child? It was the intentional decision to say that, I want to make sure that when someone is calling me about my child and I'm at work or doing ABC, I know it's pretty much without a shadow of a doubt that me knowing my kid, that they're calling me and they have a legitimate point. And it's not because he's in an environment where he's 1, 2, or 3 of, but he just happens to be being singled out as to be doing something that's worse than someone else is doing based off of the fact that, he's a Black boy. And so, I think that, when we really start looking at what goes into those conscious decisions, that I think a lot of African Americans make when they're thinking about, where they place their kids or what are they thinking about when they're at work and, that phone call, all of those things really come into play with that.
Jeremy, anything you want to add before we take some questions?
Yeah, briefly in regards to that, yeah, my kids on my mind, all the time. And a lot of times, from the dad perspective, you get so consumed in work that it's not like we're not thinking of our kids, but we're focused on something else. You have to have that strong spouse, that mother instinct. It's always thinking about the kids, always helping, always protecting. My wife is amazing with the kids. So if I'm off, trying to tackle the world, she's that, I guess, that shelter for them. Being a business owner, and the panel knows this as well, we like to control everything that we can. I try to control everything that goes on with my kids, their world. I try to protect them as much as possible. It's like Darlene said, she'll tell her son, "Hey, I need you home so I can rest." I need to control everything around me so I can rest. And my wife will tell you the same thing. The one thing is out of whack, it's on my mind, constantly going until I can get my hands around it to get back control of it. But like I said, we try to create this perfect world, this bubble for our kids, and it's almost impossible. We try to protect them. My son, he's 13, my daughter's 16. If I could keep them at home with me for the rest of my life, I definitely do it because I know I can take care of them. That's not possible. There's a whole world out there. We just have to groom them as best as we can. We want to watch them 24/7. We want to be around them 24/7, but we just can't. So that anxiety that we have, we take that, turn that into teaching moments to let them know how to act or behave when they're out in the real world, when mom and daddy is not around to, I don't want to say it, but to take that bullet for them, to take that tongue lashing for them, or to just protect.
I just have to really be grateful for all of our panelists just in general for sharing these things. I don't think that as we have these conversations in these spaces, in our businesses, in our, executive C-suites, in our rooms, behind closed doors, the conversation is still on business. It's still on how do we create the equity in those spaces, forgetting that we're carrying with us. This is one of the things I said about celebrities. A lot of people are like, well, where is Oprah? Where? I'm like, okay, y'all, she's Black too, right? She has people that she's taken on as children too. They're also mourning. They're also hurting. But you still expect them to perform to the top level. And we find ourselves having to do that all the time. And it's so much harder now than it has ever been in my lifetime. I won't tell y'all how old I am, but in my lifetime, this is as hard as it's ever been. It's been a very heavy lift to be able to perform and come here and sit in Railroad Park with you guys and still say, hey, but I still have a Black son that I have to help make sure when he's old enough to take advantage of opportunities, that he doesn't hopefully have to deal with as much of this as we have in our lives, which is a tall order, but we are working on it. So I had a call to action for our last thing here. We only have about 4 minutes left. So I do see that there is a question in the chat here on Zoom. I don't see any on Facebook. I try to keep my eye out. My profession has some social media marketing in it, so I tend to have eyes in the sky at all times. But I will read one question that I see here from Mike here in the Zoom. And it says, we are seeing this pivotal moment where the conversations are being had, but how confident are you that people are actually understanding and that we will see true change? Anyone want to take that?
So I'm gonna speak to that because I'm just gonna say that conversations like this today, opportunities for you to hear the people, again, that you see as your leaders and executives in your own city, that you check your biases. When you're listening to such conversations like we're having today, and you hear the stories that some of us are able to tell, that you take a moment of your own reflection and dig deep, check your biases. When you begin to check your own biases and become aware of how you respond, even in situations where we're talking about our young Black youth, or even in situations where we're talking about people who are of other minorities or other nationalities that you work with, you are the start to the better tomorrow. Not what I'm doing and not what anyone else is doing or saying, but it's your own individual actions that changes the scope for tomorrow. And that's what we're looking for. And that's what we need. And that's what is imperative to lead this movement to a change that will be forever for this country.
That was the only question that I saw. That gives me a chance to ask for this one last statement from each of you. And I hope that Sarah will allow me. I am big on time, y'all, so we're going to wrap this up in 2 minutes. That's a warning shot to my panelists on how long it takes you to answer this. And then they can have a formal closing here. But there was a call to action I did want to ask from each of you. And it was 2 parts. And if you could try to zip this down into like a sentence. If you could say one thing to people in professional settings that are not Black about maintaining this conversation and maintaining the energy that we see right now around equity and around equality and around social justice, what would that advice be to people who are not Black? And then the other side of that is, what would you say to Black people who are finding themselves in similar situations as we are, but who are looking to grow their careers or working in their careers? What would you say to them about the journey ahead? So 2 things to non-Black people in maintaining this energy, to those leaders and those people who are finding themselves in leadership, and then to Black people about their leadership and their own journey. So around the Zoom, again, we'll do this again, starting with, we'll go the other way. Wayman, since you're on mute, I'll pick on you.
I'm trying to write these 3 things down. I do not do good with keeping up with the.
All right, so Darlene.
I'll start though. Okay.
Okay.
I'll say for for non-African Americans who find themselves in a position within the workplace to help, with this, I would say 1, definitely listen, and then be open to what people are saying, but then also ask. Is there something they can do to help? What's going on? How do you feel? Get the feedback and the pulse of, and it's the same thing that you would do to check the pulse of anything that you're doing in your organization if there's an issue. So I would say, make this an issue that is, very important within your organization, and then ask the question and be open and honest to the feedback. And then be able to move to action from there. I would say, to us who are in positions like this, and to others, African Americans who are in workplaces and, keeping up with this momentum. I don't think now is, I think now is the time to be outspoken and bold about, what it is that, we need to do to move to the next space. I think when you really look around where the world is right now, and especially in Birmingham, how much change is taking place. When you go back to, mayoral election and just looking at the momentum of things that's occurring here, like this is a season of change. And so don't be afraid to, be in on that season of change. That's what Birmingham has been. It's in our past, it's in our DNA. So I would say, stay there and be in that space.
Right.
I lost it.
Thank you so much, Wayman, and thank you for being here with us. Jeremy, will you please answer that question for me?
So will, and I'll be brief because I know we're running short on time. To non-African American people that are listening in, I'd say number 1, educate yourself, listen to what people are saying and communicate. And also people of color, educate yourself, listen, and communicate.
Why 5, Jeremy? There you go, both sides of the table. I am here for personal responsibility, doing those things we ask others to do. Yes, sir. Thank you. And so I'm going to end with Darlene because she's going to more than likely transition us out. So Martha, if you would answer that for me.
Sure. To our non-African American panel of people on the call, I'd say, don't be afraid to be uncomfortable in the conversations. Just embrace the discomfort and to continue to listen and to welcome the conversation. And to us, I'd say to embrace your ambition and go for it, but also kind of take care of yourself and guard your mental and take care of your body, because this can be depleting, and we have so much more to give and such a long way to go. So please be kind to yourselves.
All right, and before I ask Darlene to join in, let me just say my goodbyes because I know this is the last chance I'll get to say anything. So thank you all for having me, and thank you again to all of our panelists as we get ready to wrap up, and also to everyone who's joined us in Zoom and on Facebook. We see all of you there, so thank you so much. And so Darlene, if you would close this panel by giving that advice yourself.
So my advice to people who are not Black, love. My advice to Black people, love. Thank you all for this afternoon again. An amazing conversation once again. I hope that what you heard was the heart of your leaders today, your entrepreneurs, board members, which is all reflective of the 4 people on this panel and also our moderator today. So if you hear my heart, I ask that you listen. I ask that you join in on this movement with us so that tomorrow and forever, this world will be a better place for all to live. Join us again next week, same day, same time, whole nother panel discussion. Come back and hear our Dr. Anthony Hood, who will moderate that panel for us. We are super excited to have the other 4 panelists that will join us. Register and see you all next week. Have a great evening.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I just want to echo what's being said in the comments. Such a tremendous conversation. Thank you for being so generous with your stories and your heart. It's just been tremendous. And yes, everybody join us next week for our panel number 3.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.